This time on Film Ranker, we are counting down the top 10 horror franchises of all time. And with a lot to choose from, I had to put down a few ground rules. So, a franchise has to have at least 4 movies and they have to be directly connected. But even then, it is hard to boil it all down to a definitive top 10. But here are the best of the bunch. Number 10. Saw. While it has its ups and downs, Saw is one of the highest grossing horror franchises of all time, and it has become a cultural phenomenon. Heck, it even has roller coasters based on it. The first film is fantastic, and there is a reason that it has spawned so many knockoffs and so many sequels. Yes, the storytelling gets more and more convoluted, but much like the games themselves, when the pieces fit right, the results are killer. Number 9. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. During the horror boom of the 70s and 80s, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was really seen as the popular franchise for the hardcore horror fans. The story of a crazy hillbilly family was gorier, grittier, and more unsettling than almost anything else out there, making the most out of its very dubious true crime billing. While it's not for everyone, and the sequels are really a mixed bag, it has to be at least partly credited for inspiring backwoods movies like Wolf Creek and Wrong Turn, torture porn movies like Hostel and Saw, and pretty much all of Rob Zombie's career. Number 8. Child's Play. Even if it does sit just outside of the holy trinity of 80s slasher franchises, Child's Play still has a lot to offer. Don Mancini has certainly not been averse to taking chances with his terrifying doll, moving the franchise from horror to comedy to parody and back to horror again. And while there may have been some bumps in the road, aka Seed of Chucky, there are also a lot of pleasant surprises like Bride of Chucky and the underappreciated Curse of Chucky. The remake has been hot and cold for fans, but with a TV show on the way, there's a lot more in store for the Mancini version of the story. Number 7. Scream. In the late 90s, mainstream horror movies were on life support. The big 3 franchises were all deep into sequels, and there was a bit of a lull in new films. Then Scream came along and kickstarted it all back up again. Forget the dozens of films and franchises it inspired. Forget that it made it hip for Hollywood superstars to star in slasher movies. Forget that it brought comedy to the horror genre in a smart new way. The real impact of Scream is simply that it put butts back in seats. It brought horror back to the forefront of people's minds in a way that hadn't happened in at least a decade. And in doing so, it inspired a new generation of horror fans. Number 6. Alien. Sci-fi horror can be a tricky balance. There can be a tendency to go either too cerebral, too actiony, or too hokey and end up with Plan B from outer space. The Alien series gets it just right. We have a legitimately terrifying race of bad guys. We have a rad and memorable hero. We have just enough backstory to keep the intrigue coming. We have a series of claustrophobic locations, and we have people getting clawed, tail spiked, and acided to death left and right. Even with the lull in the middle, the Alien series contains 2 of the best films of all time, and even the missteps really aren't that bad. Number 5. Evil Dead. There might be only 4 films in a TV show, but even with a small sample size by horror standards, the Evil Dead series has one of the largest ranges of anything. From suspense to gore to comedy to action to straight up horror, Evil Dead does it all and does it all well. The only weak link in the franchise is the fact that there isn't more of it. Hopefully, the rumors are true about bringing Ash and Mia together, and there's even more to come from Raimi and Campbell in the future. Number 4. George Romero's Dead series. Yes, there were kind of zombies before George A. Romero, but there weren't zombies. Night of the Living Dead started a phenomenon that continues to build momentum more than 50 years later. Also, it was a damn good film, which was followed by an even better film 10 years later, and then a few more films that were still pretty great, but did have diminishing returns. While Romero rightly gets credit for starting the zombie craze, it could be argued that his even bigger contribution to the horror genre was using the medium to put society under the microscope, taking on themes such as consumerism, racism, and social disparity. That, and he made pretty rad movies. Number 3, A Nightmare on Elm Street. The last of the big three to join the game, Nightmare brought something a bit different to the table, which is exactly what we would expect from Wes Craven. Unlike the slow-moving, silent menaces that came before him, Freddy was as menacing with his words as he was with his glove full of knives. Plus, the idea of being killed in your sleep is both genius and terrifying. There are some hints of the sort of humor Craven would later bring to Scream, especially in the later films, but don't be fooled, these movies are scary. The blender bed, the tendon puppet, the roach motel, the dream world means that there is no limit to the ways that Freddy can murder you, plus he does it with that creepy kid song in your head. Number 2, Friday the 13th. If someone is going to make a reference to horror movie villains, odds are it is going to be Jason Voorhees. There is arguably no figure that is more connected to the horror and specifically slasher movie genre than the hockey mask wearing, slow walking, weak swimmer with a machete and a hatred of teenage campers. Sure, the visits to Camp Crystal Lake aren't as cinematically capable as most of the films on this list. Heck, they are mostly paint-by-numbers slash fest, but that is why we love them. The Friday the 13th series captures the B-movie DIY tone that we want, but with just enough production value to bump it into the mainstream. This is the horror movie franchise that you watch if you are hanging out late at night with your rowdy friends. Number 1, Halloween. There is a lot of debate about what film started the slasher genre, but regardless of who did it first, Halloween is undoubtedly the film that brought it to the mainstream. John Carpenter's original is a classic and a master class in simplicity. Just a guy with a knife stabbing babysitters. That film has since spawned a complex web of 10 sequels, and while not all of the movies work, the Halloween franchise offers an insane amount of variety and a higher level of overall quality than any of the competition. There is something for everyone, and characters that we want to see more of no matter how many times they are killed in different timelines. It's telling that more than 40 years after the original, fans are still excited about new films to come. And that's it. There are a lot more films I wish I could have added. Maybe one day I'll stretch it out to a top 20, but for now, please let me know the ones you think I missed in the comments, and please like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you all next time.